With tidal wave finally being rated and placed on the list, I think that this was the best outcome of this level, since in my opinion, it being unrated was unfair considering that the level was verified before 2.2. Tidal wave has been placed at number 1 on the demons list, pushing Avernus to the number 2 spot again. It is currently the hardest rated level in Geometry Dash, and this really made me ask a question. What really is difficulty, and how do we measure it? This might seem like an obvious question, but have you ever really sat down and asked yourself, what really is difficulty as a Geometry Dash player? Most likely not, considering this is kind of an obvious thing, but it's a lot less obvious when you try to objectively look for difficulty. You see, difficulty is a weird topic, considering difficulty only factors for subjective things. To one person, one level is harder, while another person could say that their level is easier. Now, there are a few answers to this question, such as the in-game difficulty, the demon list, top players, and personal experience. I'll get to those in a minute. They have their own sections, but I want to talk about a theory that I have, something called difficulty density. Now, you might be asking, what the f is difficulty density? Difficulty density factors multiple things: how long the level is, and how many objects are in the way, and how dense they are. But let me explain. A level like Caloretta, Kyuki, or Citra has an extreme difficulty density. On the opposite side, a level like Titan Complex or Flame Wall would have a difficulty density that's very much lower, since the difficulty of those levels are really much spread out considering how long those levels are. Let's say a level has a difficulty density of Kyuki but as long as Titan Complex. You get pretty much an insane, impossible level. Difficulty density purely exists as a balancing factor to make sure that levels like Tidal Wave don't exist. That level exists and it's called Lament. Now, let's just quit all the yapping and let's get into our actual point and our actual answer for the question. How do we even measure difficulty? Well, some of you might say the GD in-game rating difficulty, and I don't disagree that this is a good surface level answer, but it doesn't necessarily answer the question about extreme demons because they suffer the same problems the original demon rating. Saturation. If you're a typical Geometry Dash player, you tend to really know what level you're getting into, but let's say you're a new player, you don't really know what the levels are and how difficult they really are. Hell, even when I'm browsing a few extreme demons, I can't tell if that is a newly placed top 25 or an entry extreme demon. Fuck it, even without the saturation problem, a level like Sakupanel does not belong in the same echelon as Silent Clubstep. I definitely don't believe that they should have the same stars, but that's a different topic. Now onto our other answer, the demons list. Now this is really gonna go hand in hand with my next answer, top players. This might be on the controversial side, but just hear me out. I am not a top player, so whatever I say about an extreme demon's difficulty won't be seen as valid to someone who's beaten, let's say for example, Slaughterhouse. I don't typically disagree with this premise though, the idea that somebody who has more experience will typically tend to be more correct on their opinions. However, I do disagree with somebody just completely disregarding someone else's opinion simply because of their experience. And when you do this, it tends to make talking about difficulty way more convoluted. Anyways, the demons list is by far the most popular and influential way of seeing the top 150 hardest demons. It's essentially the closest thing we can get to an objective difficulty measure. Even players who don't even play the game can simply look up the top 150 hardest list and see which one's the hardest. However, there is an issue though. It doesn't necessarily factor in personal preference in one skill. For example, a top player can have one opinion that differs wildly depending on their type of dominant gameplay. A wave dominant player could say that Sonic Wave Infinity is easier than Tartarus. That might sound like an insane opinion, but what really can we do to falsify that opinion? And that's really what the demon list is, a set of opinions from top players who've dedicated their entire careers to grinding and listing the hardest levels. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate the demons list. I do think they work very hard just for a list. My overall point is just that the demon list isn't perfect. Levels swap all the time. Whether they go up or down, opinions always change, and with the factor that so many levels are close together in difficulty, it makes it impossibly difficult to get a concrete, consistent list. Now on to our last point, personal experience. Geometry Dash difficulty is an extremely subjective thing, so you would naturally expect many players to have opinions that vary wildly depending on the player. I like to think of Geometry Dash difficulty as an objectively subjective thing. There are aspects to it that are objectively true, like level easy being easier than Acheron. But when it comes to levels like extreme demons that are extremely close to difficulty, it's going to be challenging trying to figure out which one's the 13th hardest and which one's the 14th hardest. Also, a problem with personal experience is that 5 to 10% of players are top players, meaning that most of us dream about beating a level that's 30% the difficulty of these top levels. And if you just purely based a difficulty upon personal experience, you'll get a wild range of a lot of levels that don't belong. To answer the question of the title, there is no one singular answer. It's an amalgamation of all these answers that I listed in the video. Difficulty is purely subjective and doesn't really have any objective factor that makes the level harder than another one. But as players, we have an axiomatic view on what makes a level harder. Does that mean difficulty exists? I don't know. Geometry Dash is a very hard game, and with this game being very hard, there's gonna be a community dedicating to making the hardest things and placing them in a list. And whether that be a list or a ranking system, the community is extremely dedicated, and I respect that 100%. However, when you try to do this, you're gonna have a lot of different opinions that make or break a lot of dramas. For example, Bloodlust versus Plasma Post Finale. We all know the story and we all know the drama about how that happened. Death threats were sent to both parties involved. Death threats over a 2D block game. But this is not the overall point of the video. The video isn't to shit on the demons list, in fact the opposite. I do think they work very hard in what they're doing, and shoutouts to them. However, I don't think you should be ostracized for having an opinion that differs from them. Even if it's an opinion that sounds incredibly insane, I still think you should have the right to have that opinion. You still might get bullied for it. I hope you liked this video, and I do apologize for taking as long as I did. I really am thankful for the appreciation and the feedback I got on my last video. I never expected a video to get 10,000 views overnight, and when I first saw it, I was amazed. I was amazed, man. I was amazed. Never have I ever thought that I would see a number next to my channel. Thank you. I thank you. Just, if you watched the video, if you commented it, if you liked it, if you subscribe, thank you. Just whatever you do, thank you. I really do appreciate all of you guys who watched the video and subscribed and are now tuning in. Thank you. There's not really much else I can say other than thank you, man. Just thank you. And with that being said, thank you for watching the video. I'm TGL. I'm out.